Hello, hello. Hi, Evelyn. I see your name. I just don't see you. There you are. Good to see you, or good to meet you. I haven't met you yet. Your mute is on. I can't hear you. There
Okay,
you go.
there.
Okay, good. Well, it's sure is nice to meet you.
Likewise.
Sometimes the only way I get to meet the agents is on Zoom calls, so it's really nice to put a face with a name.
Oh, likewise. I'm glad to meet you too.
How long have you been with us?
I just started recently.
Hi.
I'm a newbie. I want to say the third meeting from Ignite. That's when I
Oh,
started.
oh,
Yeah,
that's
Teresa
good.
put me
That's
in. Yeah.
good. Well, I remember seeing your name come across. I just, like I said, wasn't sure exactly how long because we've got a lot of new agents, so it's so nice to get a chance to meet you on Zoom. Are you enjoying your Ignite classes?
I am. I am. I'm a little overwhelmed with so much information. It's like I have to digest it so slow. So
Mm.
yeah,
The word I hear the most from new agents is overwhelmed.
yes, yes,
and
yes.
and I well remember the feeling. I tell you, I've been in business a long time, but I still remember how overwhelming it can be.
Oh
And
yes.
going through with, I really think many of you are having to learn so much more even than we did years ago because you've got so much technology
And that's it.
and some agents are comfortable with technology and some are having to learn the whole system of technology, so it can be, like you said, overwhelming. And then you've got these forms that you got to learn too.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you just recently finish your pre-licensing classes?
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
Did
I
you?
did.
Okay. Because sometimes people will wait a while before they actually join a firm. So you really getting the whole load dumped on your head, aren't you?
Yes, off and running. Yes, trying to
Yeah,
play catch up right now.
yeah, yeah. Are you coming from another career?
Well, yeah, I was administrative assistant to my husband and he's
Oh,
been
okay.
transferred. Yeah, he was transferred somewhere else and he
Uh-huh.
doesn't need an administrator because they gave him one.
Oh, good.
So now I am trying to reinvent myself and do something different.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, being that you've been in a field of administration, you'll find that helpful in real estate because you do have that side of it. It
Yeah.
still you still have to do those all your paperwork and do the administration. So being able to do both is really helpful at first. Some people find it hard to even do the administration side right at first. They hire somebody, but you know what? If you don't know what you're doing, how are you going to help somebody else that you hire to do
So
it?
true. So
You
true.
know, so I kind of like to see you, even though it might be a slower go for you right at first until you to get all these pieces put in there. I think you're probably better off to be able to do it. And you know what? It's a good time in your life to have a new chapter.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's never too late. Never too late.
Well, how'd you get interested in real estate?
Well, we have purchased and sold so many houses in our lifetime because we've moved from like Florida, uh,
Uh-huh.
well, from actually New Jersey, Florida,
Uh-huh.
Michigan, um,
Oh yeah.
Texas, in the state
Oh,
of
wow.
Washington. So we've been
Wow.
around and then back to Charlotte. So
Oh, back to Charlotte. Oh my
back to
gracious. So you
Charlotte.
started here.
Yes.
Oh my land sakes alive. Well, you have had some experience. And I really think that's where, hey Angela, that's how sometimes we all do the best is
Yes.
because we've had some personal experience with it and as being in different states, you have already seen how different it can be in
Yes.
different
Yes.
states.
Definitely.
Lordy
Yes.
mercy, it is so different in North Carolina than it is in any of those other states, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And we've had a realtor that we've used here twice because she's the one that actually helped us the first time
Oh,
and then the second time. So
oh.
I've always picked her ahead with a lot of questions about, real estate. And she's
Mhm.
like, you should think about doing it one day. And I'm like, well, one day when I settle down. And
Right.
it's happened, yeah, when I got back into town, I actually called her up first and I was like, guess what I'm doing now? She was like so excited.
Oh,
So
that is so neat. Well, we find that happening more often than would imagine. Someone who what inspired you basically to
yeah,
say, well, you can do this.
yeah.
And it kind of works out for you to be able to do it. So, well, I'm so glad that you chose to do it with Keller Williams Ballantyne. We've got a really neat group of people, and it's just I've been with them since we opened the doors. We opened that office in August of 2003, and so been with them. Hey, Maya! So we have really seen we've seen so much growth. We've seen so many careers take off, and it's been a real good trip. It's almost 20 years now,
Nice.
and so we're pleased with how many people have been able to be helped, and so we're glad you all to be here. Y'all could be part of those that are going to be part of our next chapter of history.
Well, she did highly recommend Keller Williams. She says that
Oh,
you guys
good.
really get the agent
Agent
prepared.
training,
Yeah.
the training.
So she's like,
Through the years, that has really been our mantra. It's training, and it's at our heart, because I guess I relate an awful lot to agents. I keep saying I am an agent, although I haven't I haven't been an agent as far as on the streets in many years, but I feel like I am every day because I work with y'all. And when you have a situation, it becomes my situation, sometimes when you call me. And so it feels like, we're all in this thing together. And if we can help, we identify with your challenges. And so if we can help you through some of those challenges, hopefully it'll help you to be able to not have the same pitfall the next time, go from there. So, well, Angela, how did you get in the business? I caught her in the wrong moment. You're on mute, aren't you? Yeah. How'd you get
Yeah,
in the
now I'm
business?
not. Hello.
There.
I've always wanted to be in the business. I
Yeah.
had a full-time career that I was doing for the last
Uh-huh.
14 years, and
14 years. Wow.
yeah, and that changed.
Uh-huh.
And so now I'm getting a fresh start, and I can try real estate. So I'm excited to get into it. And
Oh,
yeah.
good. Oh, good. Have you moved around a lot, or have you been
Oh
in
yeah,
Charlotte?
I've moved
You
around a
moved around.
lot.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you
Yeah,
buy and sell houses?
California.
Oh, really?
No, I'm from California originally. I lived in
Uh-huh.
Virginia, Hampton Roads area, Massachusetts, South Carolina, and then now North Carolina.
Wow, look at you. You've been around as well. Well, I started in real estate in Florida and worked down there for 18 years. And then I came to North Carolina and worked as an agent for 8 years. And then I became a broker in charge. And so I've been doing that for about 20 years. So it's almost time for me to retire, girls. But but right now, I'm still in there with you. And so we had a chance to move around quite a bit too, lived in Texas and in
Oh, nice.
Massachusetts, my husband played with the Patriots many moons ago. So we were in
Oh, how
Boston for
cool.
years. And so, and then we were in Florida for a long time. So we've kind of had a chance to see some different states and meet some
Yeah.
different people and find out. In fact, I started in real estate in Florida, and I got to tell you, I mean, it was like night and day when we came to North Carolina. I said, I don't even think I'm in the same business. I mean,
What
I
part of
had
Florida
done,
were you in?
I was in Tampa.
Okay,
Uh,
that's a great area.
yeah, we were the little area called, it was a little area called Brandon. And now I understand it's quite a big area. It's not little anymore. But no, boy, I was sure thankful to be out of Florida this last week. But oh, my heart is,
Yes.
oh, so many people, so sad. Oh, so sad. But our former team leader, a lady named Leslie Williams, she lived on the intercoastal down in Fort Myers, and her home was destroyed. I was just breaking your heart, So see, I mean, you hate it so much for anybody, but sometimes when you know somebody, it just it hits you in a different way. So, but anyway, she moved from here
Definitely.
down to Fort Myers, and so she really had, she and her husband lost everything. So, oh, it's so sad. But well,
Yeah, it
Maya,
is.
where are you from, darling? Where are
I'm
you
from
from?
Charlotte.
Oh, look at
Charlotte.
there. Oh, look at there, a native.
I am. And
You
I've
don't
been
have
in
to
like
use
the
a
service
GPS to
industry.
get around, right?
I do. I
Oh,
do that.
well,
I
you're
do.
being truthful.
Yeah, Yeah, I'm on North Charlotte, but South Charlotte, like over here in Valentine, this is a little different for me.
Different
So,
area. Yeah, yeah. Well,
yeah,
we all
it's
have to use
different.
those things. Thank goodness for them. You know what my pet peeve is? It irritates me so bad when an MLS listing says, "Use your GPS." I want to say, well, I'm not even going to show your house. I want to see directions. Do not tell me to use my GPS, although I will, and I have to. You know,
Keep that in mind.
yeah, yes, just don't be smart, Alec, with me. Tell me to use my GPS. So, not that we don't have to. Well, it's so good to get to meet each one of you and see your faces, and let me see if I can get some forms. I'll try not to lose you. If I lose you, we'll start all over again, okay?
Okay.
You would think I'd be able to do this, but for whatever reason, every now and then I do not do well. We're going to be talking about listings today, and hopefully hit some highlights for you, and maybe make things make you feel more comfortable learning the forms. Okay, let's see. I need to share my screen. Okay, and I need to pull our forms up. And I don't see you all, do I?
We can see you.
Can you? Okay.
Yeah.
But you don't see the form.
No, ma'am.
You know, it's the weirdest thing. Somehow these forms are coming up. Do you all have the same problems with using like Chrome or versus Edge? Edge seems to push out Chrome on, and I get so annoyed when because obviously you can't get it. So let's see if it'll work this way. Okay. It's still not working, is it? You still can't see the form,
No, ma'am.
right?
Nope.
That is just the weirdest thing. Hang on. Okay, I've got you all. Let's see. There's the screen. Share. Ah, Daddy, you see the form? You see the form? I see you.
Yes, we see it. We see it.
Woo, okay, we did it. I just have to keep pushing buttons so something works. All right. Now, in Keller Williams years ago, in fact, one of the first things that I loved about learning a new way of doing the business after so many years of business, Gary Keller kind of recommends a two-step listing. It's not that you go see the people 2 times, but we have something called a pre-listing package, and you put together certain forms in your pre-listing package so that if the seller will do it, some will and some won't, if they will take time to review these forms that they're going to have to fill out, they're going to have to sign. That way it keeps you from having to spend so much time going through these forms initially with them. So what we do is we put together and this group of forms and I'm going to show you today. And again, I will send them out to you after the class. Okay. If you want to maybe put in the chat, give me your email address and I'll email it to you. Just make sure I get the right email address. But anyway, if you'll put together a group of these forms and either email them to them, you know, because now through your DocuSign or DocLoop or Zip Forms, whichever program you use, you can put together a template of these forms. And then you can just email them over to the seller so that the seller, again, is going to be a little acquainted with what you're going to need from him or her. So that's the first step, is to get those forms in their hands. The second step would be that you would go to their house and you preview their house. You want them to show you all the things that they've done to their house and show the things that they're proud of in their house. That's where you do your listing presentation. So in a presentation, you're going to have some marketing. Obviously, you're going to have some information about yourself, a little bit of information about KW. Those are the things you'll learn in Ignite, I'm sure. I don't know if you've gotten to that yet, Evelyn. She said she was in her 3rd session, but you'll have a listing presentation. And if you want to have a different sample, I'll be glad to send you another sample, but I would try using initially the one that they introduce you to in Ignite. So you'll have your listing presentation, then you have your forms. So you've got two sides of it. You're going to sell yourself and sell your company, and you're going to arrive at a price, and then you're going to do your paperwork to be able to be compliant with North Carolina Real Estate Commission, and then you're off and running. So I've got I want to show you the pre-listing package first, just so you'll know what forms we're talking about. Then we're going to go into the listing side. Okay. One of the most important things that you are going to want to put in that package is something called the Residential Property and Owners Association disclosure statement. This is the seller's responsibility to complete. You don't ever complete it for a seller. All right. The seller needs to complete it. And I generally say, don't put pen to paper if you're an agent, because this is the seller's responsibility. Now, you are certainly welcome to guide and answer questions to your ability as they're filling it out. You can do it with them online, or even if you just, when you go for your listing presentation, I would take a hard copy of it. So that if you need to go through it with them there, you can certainly do that. You just don't put any marks on the paper. Okay. The residential property disclosure is basically about the condition of the property. Then in this particular form, there's also the information about the owners association, the homeowners association. So we're going to kind of work through that just a little bit as we are introducing you to the form. You may have seen the form, you may not. Evelyn might have even already seen one when she moved back to Charlotte. But this is a state law required form. As you see right up here on the left, you see that little thing right there? That's the seal of North Carolina. That says this is not coming from the Real Estate Commission. It's backed by the law. It's the lawmakers are requiring all sellers to present this. And having said that, if you're working with a for sale by owner, a for sale by owner is also required to give this disclosure to someone. So sometimes if we're trying to get a listing from a for sale by owner, we will offer to give them these forms because they may or may not know about it. So if you want to use this form, this is one of the forms that you can give to a seller. Some of the forms that are our forms that are not state required, they are issued by the North Carolina Realtors Association, and those forms you cannot give out. Those are going to be sample forms, and I'll show you those in just a moment. All right, so let's talk about yes, ma'am.
Quick question. Do we
Okay.
give them the sample form, or are they okay having the full form?
This form, they're okay. As long as it has this right here, that would be for anybody. But the sample, that's exactly, you don't have to use a sample on this. Okay. All right. On page 1 here, you're going to have some instructions for the seller. The most important one from your perspective is, if you know of something that's materially wrong or material fact of that house, if the seller chooses not to disclose it and you know it or reasonably should know it, then you have to disclose it. And it goes right here. You see this little statement right here? If you're assisted in the sale of your property by a licensed real estate broker, you are still responsible for completing and delivering the disclosure to the buyer, and the broker must disclose any material fact. Okay, so that's something that sometimes causes some duress, because the seller is going to say, I don't want you to tell. So what are you going to do? Your fiduciary duties, remember from your, what was it? The fiduciary, is that fresh corn or is that old car? I can't remember which, it's old car. One of your fiduciary duties is confidentiality. And if the seller tells you not to tell, the fiduciary duty says you can't tell. In this case, law trumps fiduciary duty. So if there is a material fact, you are bound to the public to disclose it. And again, I'm making a much bigger thing of it than you will with the seller, but you do want to point that out to the seller. All right. A seller, when they're filling it out, they can put yes if there's a problem. They can put no if they don't know of a problem. And in North Carolina, they have the option of doing no representation, even if they do know of a problem. Not a smart idea, but sometimes a person will say, I don't want to disclose it. Or they might say, well, I had it fixed and I'm assuming it's fixed, but I'm not going to disclose that there was a problem that was fixed. I'm just going to put no representation. He has the right to do that, but therein is the conflict that you might have to tell because it's a material fact. Checking no representation, if you work for a buyer, you make really, really sure that you check everything that where a seller has checked no representation. That's where you're going to have to do a lot of due diligence, a lot of inspections, make sure that if they put no representation, that's a red flag to a buyer's agent. Okay. So the no representation is something they can check. You see no representation a lot of times with an investor because they haven't lived in the property. They may not have even owned it very long. They should know, but many times an investor is going to put no representation. This particular form, there are exemptions for this particular form, and the 4 exemptions are a foreclosure, the estate, new construction, and a family member that's living in the home is now going to purchase it. They already know because they've been living in the home. So you've got those 4 exemptions, and this form would not be required in the transaction. Any other transaction, this form is going to be required. And if the seller chooses no representation, he can do so. That's the alternative of being exempt from it. Okay. Now let's go scooch down here a little bit. Look at this little section right here. It's really important that you get this filled out early on. That's why I say, let's put it in the pre-listing package from the very beginning. A buyer will have a right within 3 days of signing a contract to terminate the contract if he doesn't get this. And it's just getting it. It's not any explanation. He doesn't have to agree with it. But if he doesn't get it, he's going to have a right to terminate the contract. And any monies that had transferred to the seller or to earnest money would have to be given back. So it's important that you pay attention right in here about within the 3 days. You say to cancel the contract, you must personally deliver or mail written notice of your decision to cancel to the owner or the owner's agent within 3 calendar days following your receipt of the disclosure statement, or 3 calendar days following the date of the contract, whichever comes first. Point out those 3 days. It's kind of like a 3-day right of rescission. The buyer would have to give notice to the seller. But let's not even worry about that. Let's get it ready, get it filled out. Then you attach it in MLS to your listing, which is the nicest thing since sliced bread. Love having those disclosure statements right there, where when I print out my MLS data sheet, I've got those forms. So you be the listing agent who makes sure that the residential property disclosure is up there. I have more times than one called a listing agent and come to find out he'll say, well, they haven't finished it yet. They're going to get it, and I'll get it to you as soon as I get it. I'm thinking that's not going to work. As soon as you get it's not working. Let's get it now, because a buyer has the right to have it before they make an offer. That's why it's important to get it up there, have it ready for the buyer's agent. Therefore, you don't even have to worry about this 3-day right of rescission. Okay. All right. Down here, you're going to make sure the property address is on it, the owner's name, then the owner is going to sign it right here. This place is, once the buyer does have a copy, and that's all it has to be. They have to have a copy. Then they're going to sign this, and hopefully when you get that buyer's offer, they will send this back to you signed at the same time, just like with the mineral oil and gas rights disclosure. So now let's go on down with the form here. Make sure that you put your property address up here. If you are doing it online, where you set up the e-signatures and everything, you can set some of these things in place. You're just not going to check these boxes, but you do have to put your property address up here. Now let's talk a little bit about these boxes. Make sure that the seller doesn't neglect to check the interior boxes. It's not just about these boxes. You also have some interior boxes. All right. Those interior boxes are special disclosures so that, again, the buyer can know what type of product he's buying. I don't know if you're familiar with the term, all of a sudden I can't remember the siding. Can I believe I can't remember that name? There's a siding that a lot of people we've used the last 20, 25, 30 years that you want to make sure that you disclose the type of siding it is. And it'll come to me in just a minute. I had COVID back in the spring, and I tell you what, it has really played the number on my memory, but I'm getting it back. I'm doing much better. But the siding would be the composition hardboard. You may or may not be familiar with construction things. I've just had to learn as we've gone. The type of construction that we get into, sometimes we don't know, and you might even have to ask someone. But make sure your seller is going to be able to check the type of siding it is. Brick veneer is all brick. All right, so that would be what a lot of houses are here in that Charlotte area. You're going to have sometimes you have some trim that might be synthetic stucco. We're not seeing many problems with synthetic stucco. We did for years, but we're not seeing it anymore, other than in the trim, like around a window or across the door, whatever. That's a trim. So that really would not be a siding. That would just be a trim. So the roof is really important right now. The buyer needs to know how long the roof has been on the property. Many times the seller will know, but if they've replaced it. Otherwise, it's going to be when the house was built, and you've said right up here when when the house was constructed. So you would, if there's been any roof repair or if it has been replaced, obviously, then you're going to, he should have information here. Anytime there's been a repair, in fact, you'll hear me say often, if you're going to err on the side of disclosure, it's better to disclose it and not need to than not disclose it and get in trouble for not disclosing. Okay, so if there has been a repair, and even if the seller feels and has every reason to believe it has been repaired, I would put the repair was done, and you want to put invoice available upon request. Therefore, you're not going to post the invoice, but you would, if someone is really interested in who did the repair, when it was done, then you make the invoice available. If the seller doesn't have an invoice, obviously you can't do that, but I would still disclose that it was done, and hopefully the seller would remember who did the repair. Then you want to, obviously, if there's any water standing in the basement, let me tell you, right there is one of the biggest things that we're dealing with right now in crawl spaces. Oh my goodness, you can't believe how much moisture the damage is causing, and a lot of times it will just be standing water. So make sure. And I got to tell you the funniest thing, every now and then somebody will say, well, did you go in the crawl space? I got to tell you, I don't know, 2 out of 100 listing agents are going to go in the crawl space. I, for one, would not. I might open the door and look, what I can see, but I'm not going to go in that crawl space. That's not part of being a realtor. But you do have some responsibility to question that seller quite a bit to find out if, and a lot of times sellers don't, so they're blindsided when they get hit with this major repair bill too, from water. So you might want to at least open the door and peek your head in, shine your flashlight and see if you see anything that looks to be a problem. Obviously the HVAC, the thing that I find the most problems with, somebody will tell you that they have a new HVAC. They're so excited to tell you they got a new one. Question what they mean by new. New could be 4 years old. New could be 4 months old. So question how new it is. Then your second question is, did you replace the furnace and the air conditioning? Most of the time they have replaced the air conditioning and they have not replaced the furnace, which then could cause a several dollar differential on what the quality of that HVAC is. Okay, so you want to question when it was done. That's going to affect the way you advertise it. If you advertise in MLS or anywhere else that there's a new HVAC and there was not a new HVAC, not only is it misrepresentation, it's false advertising. So it's up to you as an agent to question that and hopefully, again, get an invoice, okay? At least have it in your knowledge and have it in your notes that you asked the question. That kind of gets you out of hot water. If they've only replaced the AC and not the furnace, the home inspector is going to go out there and say, this furnace is 22 years old. What'd you say new for? Well, then you've created a problem. All right. And most of the time it's a problem for the seller, and the seller's then going to blame you. So all that to say, question. All right. The next thing you want to question that I'm going to point out to you is the water source and the septic or sewer. You're going to find out real soon that we have had to go to extreme measures to get agents to find out if there is a sewer service or if there is a septic service, and how old the septic is, the condition. So we have a total separate form that we ask you to complete as your due diligence as an agent. This is not the seller's, this is yours, and I'll show you that in a little bit too. But again, ask and get as much information as you can from that seller. It's amazing to me how sometimes sellers think they're on county sewer and they're actually on septic. You'd be surprised. Some of them will go 8 or 10 years and never know they're on a septic. And I question how in the world they could do it, but we've seen it. So you be real careful about that. And again, I'm going to show you how you protect yourself on it. But this is where the seller discloses if he or she knows that it's on a septic or sewer. And same thing with the water. Is it on a well, or do they have city county? So this is their disclosure. Then of course they have to disclose if there's a problem. They want to disclose if there's a problem with any of the appliances. Maybe the door doesn't open on the microwave or something like that. Then they need to say, yes, there's a problem. Then they'll come right in here and make a note as number 20, the door on the microwave won't close. It doesn't mean that they're not going to fix it. It doesn't mean they are going to fix it. They're just disclosing at this time there is this issue. Okay. Then one of the things I want to point out to you, this right in here, have they done any structural changes? Have they, one you see a lot of as you're walking through the house, they'll be so excited about this new sunroom they've built. And your first question is, did they get a permit? They didn't hear you say that, but in your mind, you're saying, oh, who built it? Did a contractor build it? Did they do it themselves? Did they get a building permit? You're always wanting to stay in curiosity. And again, you're not going to say it in such a way that they think you're criticizing. You're not. You're just in curiosity. But you got to know, did they get a permit? Did they do it with the HVAC? Did they duct work, for heat? Because if it's heated square footage, you can count it. If it's not heated square footage, you can't count that as square footage. So there's several things that you need to just, like I say, stay in curiosity and make your notes as you're walking through the house. Keep your folder or keep a legal pad or something where you can make some notes on this. And finding out about the building permit, that's right here, this next 24. That is a real biggie right now, guys. So make sure that you know if they did. Make sure you know if the contractor did. I can't tell you the number of contractors that do work. They might not be general contractors, but they often, and sometimes I've seen that too. They will build a deck or they'll build a sunroom. They don't get a permit. They don't think they're going to get caught. They do not want to spend the time to wait for the county inspectors to come and inspect it, because that's time is money for people who work in the construction field. Well, all of us, I guess, to some degree, but they don't want to sit there and wait 3 hours while the county inspector says, I'll be there between 9 and 12. So therefore, they just don't get it. Well, the seller doesn't know that they're supposed to have it a lot of times. And so you're going to have to ask about these building permits. As much as I wish we didn't have to know about them ourselves, ask anytime an addition or any change has been done to that house, ask about a building permit. And we'll talk a little bit more about building permits and a little bit later. This section right here about lawsuits or foreclosures or bankruptcies, pay attention to that, because every now and then a person might be living in a home in an HOA that there's a lawsuit against the HOA or vice versa. Obviously, you want to know if there's one against the seller, but you also need to know, is there any other outside influences on that? The other thing I want you to pay attention to is the shared driveways. A shared driveway or an easement for a driveway, if it's not a driveway that already is platted as a driveway, it's what they call a private drive. It might be on a little street where there's 4 or 5 houses. Out here in Mint Hill, near where I live, there's a lot of people who families built around on the big compound of land, and then they have a road in the middle, and you got these houses around that road. And for years, it's been fine. If there was a problem, they just fixed it. But if you sell to somebody outside the family, you've got to have a shared private road maintenance agreement, because that buyer has a right to know how that's going to be maintained and the expense that he is going to incur if they do have to do maintenance. So you will need to have if it's a private road not maintained by the county or the state, then you're going to need this private road maintenance agreement. A buyer's agent is going to question that, a good buyer's agent, and then you're going to need to get the seller and the other owners of the houses on that little street to come together and write a maintenance agreement. Your attorney is going to draft it, and you might have to go door to door. Hopefully the seller will do it, but I've had to go door to door before. So to try to get that private road maintenance agreement, it will cause a loan to be held up. So you might as well, as a listing agent, find out right up front, okay? If there's an issue, right here is where you write it, and that there is not or no private road maintenance agreement, but there will be, okay? Then when we go down in here, this is where we go into the section on the owners association. There are properties that actually have more than one HOA. In some of our areas, we have planned developments, and in those planned developments, it's mixed use. You might have a master HOA policy over the whole area, and then you might have a condominium HOA that if your buyer might be, or your seller might be selling or buying in that area, you have the second HOA. So you'll see right here, there's 2 places for an HOA. So if you're in Burkdale, Maya's probably familiar with that because she said, like, she knows about the north side of Scanttown. You're maybe down in Baxter. It may be a Reflection Point, Regent Park. There are a number of areas that have a master policy and a secondary policy for the kind of most of the time it's condominium. Sometimes it might be one of the 55 plus communities, but most of the time it's a condominium. So just make sure that the seller says if they're paying more than one HOA. The master policy normally wouldn't be paid every month. They normally are paid quarterly or annually, whereas the individual, the condo, would be paid monthly. So that would kind of give you a little hint. If they tell you, well, I pay this every month, then you say, well, do you pay anything on an annual basis? Okay. We've actually had a buyer get out of the contract based upon that. This is the section again to whatever the seller knows about the HOA, they would disclose that. And here are the items that the seller believes are covered by the HOA fees. This would be what the seller knows, okay? You're going to later on have to verify that, but right now, this is what the seller believes is covered. Now, that is the end of it's a 4-page document. That is your residential property and owners association disclosure. Then I told you that there were 4 exemptions to the residential property disclosure. There is no exemption for the owners association portion. All right. Sometimes people think that if they're exempt from the residential property disclosure, that they would be exempt from the owners. Not so. So we have another form. This is your owners association. If for whatever reason there is an HOA that is covering this property, although it's not required to disclose the condition of the property, you do have to tell about the HOA. So this would be a separate form that you would fill this out if you don't fill the first one out. Okay. And this is very similar, obviously. It was just included in that property disclosure. So again, you're going to have your seller fill out what they know about this and sign it and have it ready for a buyer. Now, this is a form, like I told you a while ago, I've been in the business a long time. I have never seen a title of a form include the word mandatory. Look at this. Mineral and oil and gas rights mandatory disclosure statement. I think they mean for us to do this. What do you think? Okay. There are 3 exemptions for this form: a foreclosure, an estate, and a family member. New construction does require this form. New construction does not require the residential and owners association disclosure, but they do require the mineral oil and gas. We call it MOG, M-O-G. Now, when you're getting your seller to fill this out, this no representation is only for this line. Do not let the seller neglect these boxes. Sometimes they think they check no representation, that takes care of all 3 of these. Then they go down that no representation for those 3. That's incorrect. This line box only goes with this line. A seller may not know what a previous owner did, but the seller certainly knows if they have sold off rights or if they're going to sell off rights before they close. And that's what these are. This is the mineral rights here, and this is the oil and gas rights. This section, we have had an issue, we've had it come up in, I think, 2 different transactions. Did you know we had gold in our area? I mean, I don't think about this being an area that had gold, but we've had gold discovered in our area. And we had one situation of this down in Wilmore section of town. And we had one out here in the Indian Trail Stallings area. So where the mineral rights had been sold off many, many years ago, of course. And of course, it came up in title search and we had to deal with it, but the seller didn't know. So it wasn't an issue. It just, I thought it was kind of interesting that we've actually had that happen. We have not seen any of this with the oil and gas rights. That probably this disclosure came out of an issue over in the Cary area where a builder sold off rights to a development for fracking that happens like a mile below the house. But North Carolina lawmakers say the person who owns that property owns the air rights up and the ground rights down. So they came out with this form. So that's where that came from. Again, it's going to look very similar right here to the other disclosure form, property address, print out the person's name, the seller's name, and the owner's sign here. And then of course your purchasers would sign here. You want both of these forms attached to your listing in MLS. Now, questions and answers. I showed you the brochure here, and you certainly welcome to use the brochure. There is a questions and answers 2-page document that some agents prefer to use too. You're basically wanting the seller to know what inspections are going to be done on his house, the things that the buyer is going to be concerned with after that inspector goes through the house. So this is, again, you're giving them information. Some people are read it, some people care, but you want to give them, it's better to give them too much information and them not need it than vice versa, like I said. All right, so this is the digital copy of the brochure. If I'm going to deliver it, a package to them, pre-listing package, I like to have the actual brochure, which you can get from the North Carolina Real Estate Commission website. They're 25 cents a piece, and there's shipping, no tax. You can order some of these. They're colorful and more attractive to maybe pick up and skim through it. You can also get those down at the realtor store at the association. But they're just as simple to send it out digitized on the line here. Now, the next thing I want to look at is the lead-based paint. You remember from pre-licensing that you have to have a lead-based paint if the house was built prior to, there you go.
1978.
I see that math. You did. You're doing good. 1978. Yeah. So, and can I tell you, every now and then, I don't know if the house was built in 78 or 77. So I'm going to make sure if it was built in 78, I send that too. Again, I'd rather have it than not have it. So it says prior to 1978. So I'll leave that up to you because it does say prior. The lead-based paint disclosure, it's one of those things that we don't spend a lot of times concentrating on anymore, but it's still a very valid disclosure because lead-based paint can cause a lot of damage in a person, and particularly a child or a pet who might be disturbing that lead base. Apparently, if the lead-based paint has been painted over and over and over, which most of our houses by now have been, it is not a problem unless it's disturbed in some way, unless a child or a pet chews down on a windowsill and disturbs it, but that would be the person, their pet, that gets hurt. So right here on the seller's disclosure is if they know of any problem, disclose it. If they have any records, to disclose it. Down here is the buyer's acknowledgement to say that they have seen this statement and they're just disclosed that they had it. This little brochure right here, this Protect Your Family from Lead in Your Home. I've got you a copy in here too. And we do have those that are available in your DocuSign program. The Protect Your Family from Lead, again, hopefully people will read it. If they don't, then it's on them because you've actually given it to them, and they're going to state here if they have received the pamphlet. That's the buyers. You don't do anything on that section. You're doing up here, but let me show you what you do. Right down here, the agent has to acknowledge that you've informed the seller of his obligation. Okay, so which would be to give this disclosure. This is one of the very few forms that you as an agent have to disclose something, but you have to disclose if you've informed them about the lead base. If I were you, I'd be giving the seller that same brochure. Okay, so if you give them that brochure, then when you can sign here that you've given them and you've explained that they have to do the disclosure. Now let me show you on this down here. Not only do you have to initial up there, you have to come down here and sign. So this is most unusual on a disclosure, but you have to sign it as the listing agent. And then the selling agent or the buyer's agent must sign here, not only the buyer and the seller, but you all have to. So that's the lead-based paint. Now here's the brochure. It's actually a little pamphlet. It's not a brochure, it's a little pamphlet. Protect your family from lead in your home. So you want to, again, give it to them in either form. I like having the little pamphlet, but again, it's a lot easier. People would often prefer to have it online. Now, it's quite a lengthy little thing here. So let me scooch on down here. I'm not going to go through with it. One thing I do want to point out to you is that if they are going to be doing any remodeling, you listen. If they're going to be doing any remodeling and the house is older than 1978 or built before 1978, you want to make them aware that they should make sure that the person they hire to do the remodeling is certified to deal with lead-based paint. There is another brochure that's available for to explain that. I don't know if I put that in here. I don't think I did. Let me see. No, I didn't. But if you, it is online if you're one, but I just want you to be aware that if you're working with a buyer and you hear the buyer say, and I know we're talking about listings, but a buyer's agent needs to have that form of the pamphlet about remodeling. So you want to make the seller aware that he wants to disclose any issue of lead, but the buyer will have to certify or use certified remodelers. Now, this another issue that we have had come up in our area for years. I mean, I can't tell you. I don't think before about 6, maybe 7 years ago max, we never even heard the word radon. They didn't ever do radon inspections. Now, a radon inspection is as natural as any of the other parts of inspections. This is one, it costs extra because of the way they have to spend extra time to leave it in the house and have to go back and get it and all. But radon is something that apparently has been in our area and we just didn't know it. It's more often in a house that has a basement. So you definitely, if it has a basement, you want to question if they've ever had any issues with radon or if they know of any problem. Have they had it remediated? They might even have a radon machine in their basement area in the home. So you want to give them this. Again, this is, remember, we're sending them information before we go there, but you want to have them have this information, and that's going to remind you to ask about if they know of any radon. This little brochure comes from the North Carolina state, and there is another brochure that I thought was equally, and for some reason it seems a little more user friendly, and comes from the South Carolina, and this is not state specific. Radon is radon, and so if either one works for you or both, I've just given them to you, okay? But you definitely want the seller to be aware of radon. Now, another thing that the next 2 or 3 forms are forms that are in-house forms. These are ones that I kind of like to give you some worksheets sometimes to remind you of some questions and some things that you need to settle with your seller and or a buyer. The security system. A security system is most often built into the house nowadays. You know, we used to see them mounted on the wall, and we'd have to take them off, and they would cause all kinds of damage and whatever. Now most houses have them built in, so it's not the equipment. The equipment is a fixture because it's built in. The service is what the issue is, and some accessories. If a person has a security system and it's activated, obviously they have to have a service contract with, what is it, CPI or ADT, whatever. They have to have a service contract. Well, that service contract needs to be satisfied by the seller before they close. that, because that's a contract that's on that property. And they're sometimes they charge a pretty penny. Where this form actually came from was years ago, one of our agents was selling her son a house, and come to find out there was a $495 fee that had to be paid by the seller because the son didn't want the service, and the seller had this contract, and he got charged $495. The seller is. So, so you want to make sure the seller clarifies that with their company. I've recently had a situation where CBI didn't charge the seller anything, but the reason they didn't is because the buyer continued the CPI service. So therefore, they did not have to, the seller didn't have to pay anything because the service was continued by the buyer. So you want to make sure that the seller is aware of it, and make sure it's not totally your responsibility, but you're just trying to, try not to have any more problems at closing than you have to have, right? So make sure that the seller is aware of this, and so they know what they need to do. This is, again, an in-house form. It's not a form that you can require another agent to have their buyer sign, but you can give it to the other agent to say, we're disclosing this to you, so let's make sure that the buyers and sellers deal with it. All right. Utilities. Please have a list of utilities. It's not only a kind thing to do for the buyers, but it's also informative. One of the things that buyers in our area are not familiar with is the trash service. Most parts of the country, it's just automatically in the taxes, right? Not in a lot of areas, not a lot of neighborhoods in our area, they have to pay a separate fee for tax service. Not tax, trash service. So if they have, let's say they have a $67 a month bill for trash pickup, well, that can make a difference in people's lives. So you want to make sure if there is a service there that's outside of lights and water, that you disclose it, and you want to disclose maybe you might have the cable company. There are some neighborhoods that we sell in that there would be only one cable company that's servicing that area. You want to find out if Google Fiber is out there these days, because it's not everywhere. So again, any information that you can glean from the seller to pass on to the buyer, it makes life a little easier for the buyer. Now, the property taxes, you want to talk to the seller about the taxes. One of the fields that you're going to have to fill in when you enter the listing in MLS is the tax location. Tax location has a default of the county. If you don't choose the county, you can choose no city tax paid, and it will be just the county tax. There are taxes due for anyone who lives in Matthews, Mint Hill, Huntersville. There are city or township taxes that are also charged. So you're not just being charged the county rate, and that field causes so many compliance tickets to be sent out to our agents because they're not really sure. And sometimes when you go in to look at the tax record, it doesn't tell you, so you want to talk this right here. You want to ask the seller, if the seller pays, let's say Mecklenburg County, they pay city taxes, which in my situation is Matthews. Is there any additional assessment being charged? Most of the time there's not, but occasionally there might be. That is just giving some information that is pertinent to the buyer, because you're going to have to put it in MLS. All right. Now, those are the forms that we would use as what we call a pre-listing package. Now let's go to the listing side. Let's pull it up for you. And again, I'm gonna hope I can find it. Hang in there. Okay, the listing folder. Looky there, we did it, we did it. Now, I have several different tools or hopefully helpful things for you. This is the pipeline or the seller pipeline when you're going through command that you'll see that this is like a checklist. I'm not going to go through every one of these. Again, this is just a tool to help you if it helps you. We have the seller pipeline in command. Then we have, let's go on down here. This is hopefully a step-by-step list of things that you will encounter as you get a listing. You might want to kind of review these as you're going to get a listing, because you're going to need many of these things. From one thing that I have my eyes hit on right here, you want copies of utility bills. If they'll give you a copy of the utility bills, you don't even have to have them fill out the utility sheet. You can do it yourself. The utility bills are going to tell you if they have city, sewer, and or water service. So you already have that as part of your due diligence. You might want it. Another thing, if you can get a copy of the seller's deed in Mecklenburg County, you can go online and get a copy of the deed. You're going to need to know who has ownership in that property. Okay. Just 2 weeks ago, one of our agents listed a property for a husband and a wife. Well, they signed all the paperwork, but come to find out, the wife has no ownership in that property because it's in South Carolina. It's not North Carolina. In North Carolina, the wife would have marital rights, not in South Carolina. So here we've got all the documents signed by both parties. So just be careful to look at who owns the property, and particularly if it is an entity, like if it's a trust or if it's a LLC, you want to make sure who has the right to sign it. And that's the way you do it, is have a copy of the deed. Okay. You obviously need to get a copy of the restrictive covenants. If the seller gets the copy of the covenants from the HOA property manager, it doesn't cost them anything. If you try to get it, they could charge you up to $200 because you're not paying monthly dues. So you want to get the seller to get the copy of the restrictive covenants, anything that CCRs or any deed restrictions. Okay. And the seller obviously is going to give you the balance on his existing mortgage. This kind of gives you an outline or step-by-step as when you meet with a client. Again, I'm not going to go through the whole thing. This is for you. And if it helps you, great. If it doesn't, toss in the trash. But hopefully it will give you some ideas as you are getting a listing. This is an overview. I kind of like, in my mind, I like to have the picture. I want a drone view. I want to know the picture and of where these things fit together and how they fit together. And so one of our agents put together this drone view of a listing process for you. So again, it kind of just spend some time reading through this and see if it kind of helps you to have the overview too. And I told you about the exemptions. This is where it's in black and white, the exemption to those disclosure forms. Now, well, I guess it was drilled in your head in pre-licensing, just like it was mine. You have to have the working with real estate agents disclosure, your first substantial meeting, since you're going to be meeting with them at the listing presentation. You don't put it necessarily in your pre-listing package, although there's nothing wrong with you putting it in there. You definitely have to have it before you go and sit down with them in your listing presentation. And this disclosure, just I told you a while ago, the residential property is the seller's disclosure. This is your disclosure. This is not for them. This is your disclosure telling a seller how we're going to work together, or what we're going to offer to them to work together. in our, with our firm, we do offer seller agency where we would only represent the seller. That's a single agency or seller's agency. But we also offer something called dual agency. Dual agency is the firm being a dual agent, and an individual agent can be a dual agent as long as the firm is. An individual can be a dual, or what most people prefer is that the listing agent will be designated to work only with the seller, and we will designate another agent in our firm to be the buyer's agent. That's for the person who said, well, I'm hiring you to take care of me. I don't want you to work both sides of the transaction. So if they say that, you can't be an individual dual agent because they've told you they only want you to represent them. So the way you want to help them to understand is that you can be designated by the firm as that is allowed to be a dual agent. Then a buyer's agent, whether or not it's someone who already is working with the buyer and comes in to sell your property, that person would be automatically the designated buyer's agent, or you might attract a buyer. You might have the opportunity to be an individual dual agent. If you have the opportunity to be a dual agent and the seller has said, no, you're going to just represent me, then you have to call me as the broker in charge and say, help me find an agent that will represent the buyer, because my seller says I have to be designated, just represent them. You don't want to go into great detail, but you do want to disclose that those are opportunities of ways that we as a firm offer to sell or work with a listing or a seller. Okay, so here's your dual agency, here is your designated agency, and then you've got this situation right here. You are basically telling them about this. If we are the listing agent, then we want to help a seller to understand that if they choose not to have a realtor represent them, they need to be selective in what they disclose, because the buyer's agent certainly is not going to be representing them. And again, you don't want to go too much detail here. This is just basically being courteous to make them aware of it. These are the boxes that we primarily would check. If you do talk to them about that, you go ahead and check that. And that's just a disclosure. It's a disclosure of how you as an agent with our firm in the state of North Carolina is going to work with them. Hopefully 2 or 3 minutes, maybe not as much as detail as I went into, but you definitely put that. And all they're signing here is that you went over it with them. All right. They're not signing agreement. They're signing that you went. And the most important thing again is to point out this is not a contract. This is just a disclosure form, and they're signing they got it. Here's your name, your license number, and the firm name. Now, this next form is your listing agreement. The listing agreement, and you notice right up here, Form 101G, when you look in your forms library, if you find 101G, that's some written instructions or written guidelines that are posted by the North Carolina Realtor Association, who actually do these forms. So if that would be helpful to you, just be aware of it. After you fill out a couple of them, you'll feel pretty good about it. You won't necessarily need the guidelines, but just know that they're there. Here, the listing agreement. Let me show you right here. Do you remember in pre-licensing the difference in the exclusive right to sell versus exclusive agency listing agreement? Do you remember those two terms? That might have even been on your exam. If you have an exclusive agency, that means anybody can sell it, but you're only going to get paid if you sell it. That's obviously not the way we want to do business, right? But every now and then you'll get in a situation where a seller says, well, I just want whoever's gonna bring me an offer. Well, then it's not really a listing, right? Unless you think you can bring the buyer, again, which would involve dual agency. But just be aware, watch the term right up here, watch this. Do not select exclusive agency, select exclusive right to sell. That means with the exclusive right to sell, you are going to be involved in any transaction of selling that property, and you're going to get paid because you have listed it and you've made it available. So any transaction that occurs, you get paid. You're a part of it. All right. So just a word to the wise. Make sure you say exclusive right to sell. Now, right in here, you're going to put the seller's name. It's not illegal to put a nickname, but why not just use their legal names to begin with? And I would suggest you might want to look at their driver's license. The reason I'm chuckling is we had a situation a few years ago where a seller, the man was given all the information, and he spelled his wife's name wrong. And so all this went obviously to the attorney, and we had to get another document to correct the name of the wife's name spelling. So from then on, we kind of think it might be a good idea to have the driver's license. It's not required, but just ask, particularly maybe you're dealing with someone with from a different heritage. We've got a lot of people in Charlotte from lots of different countries, and we might not know how to spell the name. So that would be one way you might want to do it. Now right here, this line it's between the seller and the firm. It is not Keller Williams Ballantyne area dash Sabre Romeo. I don't need to be in there. You don't need to be in there. You're not the firm. The firm is Keller Williams Ballantyne area. Okay. The agency agreement is between the firm and the client. In this situation, the seller. Now, right here, this is, boy, you talk about a power packed section. Oh, by the way, when it's in blue, that means it's something you'd be aware of. It's a note. Take note. If it's in red, it's a warning. So this is something to take note of. When you are filling this out up here as to the owner, this first section here talks about someone who has passed away. I can't tell you how much challenge this has been. I think probably for over a year now, maybe closer to 2 years. We have so many people or so many properties that are being sold as part of estates. I don't know if we just reached the magic age of the bulk of the population is passing on or what, but I've never in my 40 years real estate seen as many estates are dealing with properties that don't have a will or do have a will. So if a person is deceased and you need to find out whose name needs to go up here, call me. That might be the simplest thing to do. But just a little advice here. You don't automatically put estate of whatever the person's name is. You don't automatically put all the heirs' names. Sometimes you do. A lot of it depends on if there is a will or if there's not a will. So just be aware that you want to ask, first of all, is there a will? Has it been probated is the next question. We have one going on right now that they're having to do 3 probates back. The person who's selling it, the woman died, the husband, the son died. No, it would have been the father, and then the mother of that man. So they're having to clear 3 probates before they can actually sell the property. So you want to make sure, was there a will, first of all? The will would state who can sell the property, whether it's an executor or an executrix, or does the property pass right on to the heirs? In that case, the heirs would have to all sign. So those are just a simplistic way of looking at it. And it's also good to run that by an attorney. If If there is a will, it simplifies things greatly. All right. But the probate needs to have been done before you actually put it on the market. In this situation I told you about, there was 3 probates had to be done. The seller wanted it sold immediately. The agent put it on the market, had no idea of the complications. And now it's causing all kinds of problems. Tried to get it resolved for the buyer who can't move in the property because of the probates. So probate takes a little while. Minimum of a minimum 30 days. And generally it takes longer than that. All right. So just be aware of that. This right here, if it is an LLC, if it's a corporation, it may be a trust. If it's an LLC or a corporation, you should be able to have something in writing from the seller that would say that that person has the right to sell on behalf of the name of that corporation or that LLC. Often with an LLC, it's a manager or member manager. It cannot be member only. You're going to have the person who has the right to sell. You can check the name of the corporations and an LLC, the name of the LLC, by going to the North Carolina Secretary of State website. It's either NCSOS or SOSNC. I get them confused, but just Google the Secretary of State in North Carolina. And then on that site, it's public record as to the name of the entity and who is the registered agent, who is the manager. Obviously, most of the time in a corporation, it's going to be the president or possibly a treasurer. So you can look that up. But what I'd prefer is you have, and you don't have to have all their corporate documents or all the LLC, just that one page out of it that says who has the right to sign on their behalf. A trust, we're seeing a lot of trusts these days, where the individuals, there's an irrevocable trust, and there's family trusts. A family trust would be possibly a husband and wife who have set up a trust so that their children can avoid probate. The trust is just going to be able to follow the dictates of the will. They, in that situation, most of them would be, most of the time, both parties would be a trustee. Okay, so and the trust documents will say that the either or both are for both signatures required. It'll be in their documents. So if there is a trust, you need some attorney looking it over, unless it's pretty specific that that they sign it. Now, this area right here, this is when you're going through with a divorcing couple often. I think we mentioned a little while ago that in North Carolina, the default ownership rights in a marriage is that both parties own it 100%. It's called rights of survivorship. If one dies, the other one has the right to sell it. The other one, the second party owns it 100%. If you're in South Carolina, it's not that way. So just be aware of it. We'll talk about South Carolina, how it is, but it's not that way. But the default in North Carolina is the 100%, 100%. Every now and then you get in a situation that there's been a divorce. And if it wasn't addressed in the settlement state of the divorce, you might possibly, or you may be in the, or they may still be in the divorce settlement arrangement. You might have a previous spouse, and then you have a current spouse. Maybe it's the same man or woman. Sometimes you kind of have to go back and get the previous one signature. And I know that's a little personal to get into with people, but you need to know anybody who would have a right of ownership to that property is going to have to sign off on it before it can be sold. So just be aware of that. Okay. Right here, when you come down here, anything you see that's in bold or italicized or capitalized, make sure that you pay attention to it, even without the red box over it, okay? This is basically saying that you have gone over the working with real estate agents disclosure, which we've already talked about. Term of the agreement. An agreement is not an agreement unless you have a beginning and an end. You're going to have the beginning term of the term, and you have to have an end of the term. The beginning of the term typically is the date that the agreement is signed, all right, which would be checking this right here. This is one of the very few places I'm going to say, I want you to omit that that is even in there. I do not want you to be caught in a code of ethics violation. So disregard that that's even in there. You're going to start it the day of that you sign it. Now, right here is the expiration date. The expiration date, you can do 3 months, you can do 4 months, you can do 6 months. It's up to you, the period of time that it's not really up to you. It's up to the seller to agree to what you suggest. We've had such fast moving properties or fast moving market in the last 6 or 8 months. You didn't need about a month to get it sold, but we're beginning to see a more balanced market. So if I were you, I probably wouldn't spend a lot of money and time unless I had it for at least 4 months, 4 to 6 months. But again, negotiate that with the seller. The property address, when you start to do a listing, to fill out the paperwork, you want to pull the tax record for that particular property. If you go on the Realist and look up the address, you're going to pull the tax records. And if there has been a previous listing, you want to look at that, but do not copy it. Please do not copy it. That agent may or may not have done an adequate job. They may or may not have known what needs to be going in there. So don't copy, but look at it. Look at what was attached at that time. You might want to look at some listings in the neighborhood. You'd be a little bit more familiar with the neighborhood. But the main thing you're going to need is the tax records, because when you start filling out this information here and this information, you are going to pull this from the tax records. Now, the street address, the seller obviously is going to give you his postal address. You see this little note right here? A lot of times the post office will give a different address than what the tax records will. So you want to confirm with the seller, which is the mailing address, but the legal address is going to be what's on the tax records. So you want to make a note in your remarks when you put it in MLS. If the address is different, make a note that the address is different due to the postal instructions. And that's where it says right here. Now, the legal description, and a legal description, we don't use plat references. There's certain parts of the state that they do. In our area, we do not have plat references. So when it says right here, plat reference, you may or may not put anything here. You might just put a little dash there that you looked at it, block and section, a little dash, you looked at it. You would have a subdivision or a condominium if there is one. If you are listing a condominium, look for the word unit, U-N-I-T, unit. Unit will be in the legal description if it's a condominium, because obviously the condominium has no land with it. The condominium association owns the land. They do not own the land, so it would say unit. If it's a townhome might have a very small piece of land, but it's going to be a lot block, a legal description, all right? Now, the legal description that you see written as legal description in tax records, put that right in here, spell out the whole thing. And again, it'll start with an L for lot. So usually a B and an M for the section and all. So you want to put the full legal description right here. If it is a meets and bounds, you probably won't see many of those. but you remember what the meets and bounds is from pre-licensing? It's that it'll have a legal description that'll be about that long. So just you would put C attached, meets and bounds, C attached, and then you have a separate piece of paper with that printed out. So you want to put the legal here, and right here where it says PIN, PID, that's that property ID or the tax ID, parcel ID is referred to in all those ways. That's that long list of digits. When you look at MLS up on the right-hand side, you remember seeing there's a hyperlink, and when you click on those numbers, it goes directly to the realist tax records. So you want to have all those numbers because you're going to have to put it in MLS so that you'll have that direct link in MLS. That's a required field. So you want to have the parcel ID, and it's right there on the tax record for you. You want to put the legal description here and the deed booking page. You do have to have that. And again, it goes into MLS. The deed booking page will be a string of numbers that has a dash somewhere in the middle of it. You'll have 4 or 5 numbers and then a dash and 3 or 4 more numbers. The first set of numbers is the deed book. The second number is the page. Okay, so you'll have a string of numbers here that generally has 2 or 3 dashes in it for the property ID. The deed booking page will only have 1 dash with a set of numbers. Let's come down here to fixtures. Oh my goodness. Make sure the seller understands what a fixture is. Years ago, we only had that, and I guess you might have got taught the same thing in pre-licensing. There was it screwed, glued? There's 2 or 3 other words. I can't remember the 4 of them. That's terrible. But the way I remember a fixture is if it causes damage when it's taken down, that's a fixture. Okay, so that's my definition. If it causes damage, that meant it was affixed somehow and it should have been left there. In our list of fixtures from the seller side, the same list is on the offer to purchase. So it should match when you get it from the buyer. These fixtures, the first thing on there is called alarm and security system. We've already talked a little bit about the security system. The thing you want to watch for in the security system as far as a fixture would be, are there any accessories not to the main system that's built in the house? If there are some accessories, you need to make note of that, and you would come down here where it says leased items, and you want to make a note that the accessories to the security system will not be conveyed because they don't own them. But this is where you would put accessories. Another thing you want to make sure of alarms or any like doorbells and well, not some of the chimes anymore, but the doorbells, like these Ring doorbells, or I think some of the security systems security companies have put special doorbells on the properties now. Be very careful to note that whether if that's going to stay because it was built in by the seller, or is it built in because it was a security system that did it. Okay. There's 2 things I want to point out to you. Obviously you can read these, but look here where it says all stoves and ranges. For years, it said all built-in stoves. Then we had the arguments that people would anticipate because there was a stove there that it should be left with a house. But there were sellers who were saying, no, it's a freestanding stove. I bought that and I slid it right in there. It is freestanding. I shouldn't have to leave it. Well, the form writers solved that argument. They said all stoves stay, and that's where you get all. It doesn't cause damage when it's pulled out, but the contract says all stoves stay. All right. The other thing I want to point out to you is this thing right here, storage shed and utility building. Oh, you can't believe the arguments that go on a storage shed and utility building. Storage sheds, the owner feels like they own the storage shed and they can take the storage sheds if they want to take the storage shed. those she sheds. They want to take them, they can. Not according to the North Carolina contract. The North Carolina contract says a utility building and a storage shed stays with the property. So when you're walking the property and you look out there and you see a storage shed, what's coming through your mind? Do you plan to leave the storage shed? If you don't want to leave it, then we've got to put it on the agreement right here that it doesn't stay, it doesn't convey. It's attached to the ground, but it's not going to convey. So you want to make sure to identify in the listing agreement, if the seller says, I don't want to leave my storage shed, then you've got to make sure that you advertise that correctly in MLS, that the storage shed does not stay. It doesn't have to stay unless the seller agrees to it. All right. The other thing, mirrors. Just had this happen last week too. Mirrors attached to walls, ceilings. I'm not sure why we have that. Cabinets or doors. And look at this. All bathroom mirrors stay. All bathroom wall mirrors. Again, for years, the big argument was taking the powder room, beautiful decorative mirror off the nail. The seller takes it on to Texas with them. Yeah, that was one of the places they took it to. And the buyer walks in and there's this hole in the wall, or a big nail still left in the wall. And the beautiful mirror that she really wanted is not there. So the form writer said, from now on, it's gonna be all bathroom mirrors stay. So that, like I say, it just happened last week. And the seller said, well, I got to take it the last time. She moved about 7 years ago. Well, why couldn't I take it this time? And I said, because the contract is different this time. It's not the way it was 7 years ago. So you might want to talk to him about that pretty bathroom mirror when you're walking through the house too. All right. Now this little section here, unpairing and deleting data from devices. This came in about 1.5 years ago. They brought this paragraph into the contract. Obviously, we've gotten so many, Alexa and Google and all the ways things can be paired. We've got to find ways to unpair them so that there's no possibility that someone could, the seller could get back into that buyer's house. Garage door openers. The systems, there's so many integrated now that you operate it with your phone. So all those things have to be unpaired and put back into the manufacturer settings so that, again, it's a security thing. Items leased or not owned, you're going to note those right here. The thing that you're most going to be dealing with on this would be the security system. The other items that do not convey, if there's something that the seller, maybe the seller's, maybe the woman says, but I got that rose bush from my grandmother's garden and I can't leave that rose bush. Obviously a rose bush would stay because it's planted in the ground, unless she says, I'm taking that rose bush. And if she says, I'm taking that rose bush, you're going to note it right here. And what I would suggest that you do is take a little, one of those little tiny Ziploc bags and put a note in it, does not convey. Take a little green tie and tie it onto that rose bush. So that when anybody's walking through that area, if they think they want that bush, it's very noticeable that doesn't stay. All right. So put it here first and then do something to make it obvious, as people walking through the house would understand that. Personal property, by and large, should be done outside of this contract. An attorney, a lender does not want to see a contract, an offer to purchase that says the pool table or the patio set, some of those things stay. they don't want to see that. Even though it says of no value, they don't want to see it. So they're going to send it back to you. So as the seller, as the listing agent, help the seller to understand that personal property in most regards would be the refrigerator and washer and dryer. Those are the three things that a lender is okay with. So if the seller wants to leave the refrigerator and washer and dryer, you are going to put that here. And like I said, the lender doesn't care if he does say it no value. But if the seller wants to leave it, you're going to put it there. Then you're going to put it in MLS. The seller is offering that refrigerator. More often it's just the refrigerator. When the buyer's agent presents you a contract, if the refrigerator is not on that contract, the seller is under no obligation to leave that refrigerator. Does that make sense? The seller is offering it. The buyer's agent should put the refrigerator on the offer to purchase. If it's not on there, the seller has the right to think, well, they don't want the refrigerator. I'll sell it to the next door neighbor. Now, a prudent agent is going to clarify that. But sometimes you got so many things going on in your mind, you don't have time to worry about the refrigerator. But just know that legally, unless it's on the offer to purchase, it is not required to be left, even if you have it in MLS. If you don't have it in MLS, but the seller would be willing to offer it or agree to it, then obviously it's got to be on the offer to purchase. So, and sometimes that happens. Sometimes the agent will write refrigerator on there and you didn't offer it in MLS. So again, if the seller agrees to it on the offer to purchase, it's okay. He would not have had to agree to it on the listing. Okay. Home warranty. We have not seen home warranty sold very much in the last year and a half because of the market we've been in. I have a feeling we're going to be seeing some more of them in the future, but as a listing agent, it's important to let the seller know that they can put a warranty on their property while it's listed. They do not pay for the warranty until time of closing, when they would use that as a marketing toy, a toy tool or whatever, to give to the buyer. All right. The seller, if they have, let's say the water heater went out or something happened on some other appliance, they would have the benefit of having the warranty. They would have to pay the trip charge, which more than likely is going to be $75, but they would at least have some warranty coverage. So it's a benefit to a seller, as long as they feel like most likely the buyer's going to ask for it anyway. So they might as well make it a good marketing tool. Now, the thing you've got to help the seller to understand, this is right here. We do not take a fee for arranging for a warranty. There have been so many RESPA lawsuits. Our firm many years ago decided it's not worth taking a chance on it. So you're going to put 0 there because there is not going to be a fee. The listing price is something that you're going to decide along with the seller after you've done your CMA, and you can talk to them intelligently how to look at all the different properties that you've looked at. You're going to learn in Ignite, and you're going to hopefully attend any class you can on CMAs. That is one of the CMAs and negotiation. Those are the two things you don't ever want to miss a class on, because it's a skill. It's something, it's not a science, it's a skill. You've got, even an appraiser will tell you that. So you've got to keep learning and keep honing that skill. So make yourself available to any classes on CMAs or negotiations, okay? But you're going to do a CMA, even if it's just a quick CMA. You're going to want to do a CMA so that you can uh, give your professional advice on pricing. I would rarely ever say a set price. I would always give a range. Um, you can't detect what that's going to sell for, but you can give a range based upon the information that you're looking at, what it should sell in that range. So that's what I would look at for your the sales price. When you're entering the information in the MLS, you can put a number of different ways to finance. Obviously, cash is always good. FHA, VA, USDA, conventional. Those are the ones that you are going to see mostly. If the house, and I tell you what, I never in my wildest imagination would ever believe that an FHA loan could be financed over $400,000. Y'all may have heard a different number than recently. The last number I heard was like 417, I think. And I went, whoa, that was what a VA was for so many years. But the FHA VA have much higher limits now. A USDA, that's 100% financing. It does have qualifications, obviously, and most of the time it's the location of where the property is. The buyer would have to have some qualifications as well, but the location is really critical on USDA. You can go online and Google that and read about the USDA. Not every property would be able to offer USDA if they're not in the right location. Conventional, that's what you see most, obviously, is your conventional loan. You rarely will see a loan assumption or seller finance. So you might not offer that. Occasionally a seller wants to use seller financing. If you do, let's talk to me and we'll talk to the attorney. That has to be a separate mortgage document. Loan assumptions, we just might start seeing some of those because, the last 2 or 3 years with the rates as low as they were and people did finance at a low rate, we just might start seeing those. But again, you probably are not going to offer that unless the seller would be willing to. The compensation here, again, for years, that was almost an automatic 6%. It has not become automatic in the last year. Things have kind of changed a bit. So there are some times that a seller is not willing to pay 6. We've had 6, 7, and 8 for years and gave them a choice. Now we're looking more like 5 and 6 choices, more often a 5. But what I want you to point out to you right here, look at this word total. If the total is, I'm going to use 6%, then you're going to offer an amount down here to a buyer's agent. The total is up here, the total, and I say 6%, and you're going to offer a buyer's agent 3% or 2% or 2.5%. There is no set amount. As much as we would love to be able to have that set, it's a negotiable item. And I'm seeing more right now of a 2.5% go to the buyer's agents and maybe a 5.5% to the list as a total, which would leave 3% to the listing agent, because listing agents are saying they spend so much money getting houses prepared to sell. Sometimes they are able to get the seller to pay for staging, sometimes not. A lady, one of the agents told me yesterday that she spent $5,000 on staging and all the photography that was done, and she itemized several things, and I thought, $5,000, but that's what she had receipts for that she had done. And so the cost on listing properties is pretty high right now in order to compete. So you need to take that in consideration. And listing agents are feeling like, because of the expense that they are fronting, that they should have a little bit higher. Buyer's agents do not agree with that. buyer's agents feel like, well, you haven't hauled and hoped, as Bill Geller would say, all over this town. You haven't put in 5 offers and not got one of them accepted. So the buyer's agents don't agree with that at all. But I'm just giving you some scenarios. It's what you work out with your seller and what the seller would agree to. But just you keep in mind that the total is up there on the first page. Because if you offer, let's say you offer 3% to the buyer's agent, you only put 3 as the total, guess who doesn't get paid? Right? So make sure you have the total and you have the this one over here. And right here, you see there's 3 boxes. Do not check either the top or the bottom. The middle one is the only one that we're going to work with. We're going to work with buyer's agent. Okay. We don't let somebody else represent our seller. We represent the seller, and we're certainly not going to go by somebody else's guidelines. So we wouldn't do that. Let me see one of the blank, this blank here. This is your protection period. Most of the time we put 60 or maybe 90 days in there. You can put 15, you can put 365. If the seller were to try to sell to, let's say, a buyer without you, and you are the one that introduced the property to the seller, you should have a right to get paid. And a period of time that a buyer might wait until you are past your protection period might be more likely they might not want to wait 90 days. Whereas if you put 15 days in there, they just might wait 15 days and come back and try to buy it from the seller as a for sale by owner. That is not a real strong paragraph. It's not really, you don't have an awful lot of protection, but basically you're wanting the seller to understand that you do have some rights. And it's more or less giving them the rules and the boundaries. But if push came to shove and it went to legal, you probably wouldn't be covered by it, to be honest with you. Let's come down here to the firm's duties. This form was rewritten just a little bit in the way the formatting, and I think they did a really good job of making it a little bit more user friendly to understand. Just putting a highlight that we'll use our best efforts to find a buyer. That doesn't mean that we're going to bring the buyer. A lot of times sellers get so angry because they say, well, my agent didn't do anything. My agent didn't bring me one offer. I said, that's not what the agent's responsibility is. The agent is responsible to find you a buyer, which most often is going to come from another agent. So you can just kind of read through the bold sections here. Best effort to find a buyer, disclosure of material facts. You've got to be cautious of those material facts. I can't tell you how many agents have been in trouble not knowing what a material fact or what to disclosure. You're going to disclose not only the material facts of the offer or terms of offer, but the facts. Other professional services. We use something called professional services agreement. And so you might make sure that you have knowledge of that form, the professional services disclosure and election, I think it's called. Now here, this is really big right now. This last year, particularly, real estate firms have made a concerted effort to make sure that our agents are abiding by the fair housing rules. As you can see, it's capitalized and bold to the point we're supposed to talk about this, to the point, you see this warning here, the seller has to initial that we have talked to him about this. Now, this little section right here, you see about the buyer's letter to the sellers, we're not seeing those anymore and shouldn't. The National Association of Realtors came out and said that so many people were violating fair housing laws when they were trying to write a letter to identify as a good buyer for the seller. So what you want to tell the seller is, if the buyer does present one of these, what we call love letters, you can't participate in handling that letter to them, because you're not going to take a chance on violating fair housing, and nor are you going to take, you can't take on the responsibility of deciding if it's a fair housing violation or not. So the best way of doing that is to help the seller to understand that you would not be able to handle that love letter with an offer that you might bring, because you're going to bring all offers, but a love letter is not a part of an offer. It would be an additional item. So you're not going to pass that on to them. And again, you're going to get the initials by the seller. Now, this section right here on marketing, this is probably what causes the most chagrin in most of our listings. And back in May of 2020, yes, right when the COVID hit everybody, NAR introduced this policy called Clear Cooperation Policy. The Clear Cooperation Policy says that every member of the MLS will enter the listing in MLS within 1 business day of public marketing. So that means you would have to have it ready, your pictures done, your measurements done, all these things that you need to know about to put it in MLS. And within 1 business day, you can put it in MLS. That's not realistic. But apparently there were some lawsuits that were saying that people were holding on to listings and not putting them in as previously agreed upon within the individual MLSs. So if an MLS is part of the NAR, which they have to be, and we're members of the MLS and NAR, which we have to be, then we have to abide by the Clear Cooperation Policy. So what has happened over the past couple of years as we've worked this policy, it has come to be that we can delay the marketing date. Instead of putting it in within 1 day, we can put a marketing date in here, right here. So let's say you've got the listing agreement signed on maybe the 1st of the month. If you know that you cannot have everything ready to go into MLS until the 5th of the month, then it's got to be a very silent ghost listing. You can put right here, let's say October the 5th. You cannot talk about it. You cannot tell anybody about it. The seller cannot tell anybody about it. It has to be truly a delay that's ghosted. All right. But that maybe the seller needs time to paint the mailbox, or maybe the seller needs time to do some landscaping or whatever. So there's going to be no marketing period. All right. For that period of time. Now, then you've got to decide on October the 5th, are you going to go coming soon and give a few more days to introduce it to MLS without making it public? Or are you going, when I say public, available to everybody, or are you going to go active on the 5th? Now, here's your first date here that it's going to, you're going to do something either in MLS or you're going to do something to market it. You have 2 options. You're going to have public marketing, which includes coming soon, or you're going to have what's called an office exclusive. Office exclusive, the title of the form that's used for that is firm exclusive in our MLS. That means you're not going to make it public to the general population, but a firm exclusive would be, you could make it, marketing it just within our firm. Our agents could show and could sell that property. There's a form that has to go with it, and that form is called the MLS Canopy, MLS Firm Exclusive. We would have to have that particular form to go with this. That is not the way most properties are sold or marketed. That is an option. Most properties are within this paragraph right here. If you're going to do the coming soon as part of the initial public marketing, the seller is going to initial here that that's what he wants. He doesn't want just our office to handle it. They're going to initial, they want public marketing. Then you've got the coming soon advertisements or advertising says. There is a form with the MLS called coming soon no show. And I'm going to show you those in just a moment, but I want you to get the concept at this particular time. The coming soon advertising would need to go in on the date we put here. If that's October the 5th, then coming soon has to go into MLS on October the 5th. Then this date right here, that's the date that we're going to go active in MLS when it's syndicated and it's wide open to everybody and anybody, and hopefully everybody is going to see it to bring you an offer. But that's when it's exposed as an active listing in MLS. That's the marketing date. It's so confusing because there's marketing dates in 3 or 4 different ways. So this date is when it's not just in MLS, it's also going to be active in MLS. Now you're going to have that date that's going to be entered in MLS when you enter it in as a coming soon, because MLS wants to know when is it automatically going to go active. Coming soon is very helpful to you from the standpoint of it gives you time to find to get all your ducks in a row for the listing. It also gives you time to put a sign in the yard, coming soon. It kind of teases the market a little bit, and it teases agents, the buyer's agents, that it's going to be available. The clincher is the no-show. Sometimes we just call it the coming soon form. We probably should never just say coming soon without saying no-show. Coming soon, no-show means nobody can see it. The neighbor can't see it. Another agent can't see it. Nobody gets in that property to see it. You do want to have your virtual tours ready. You want to have your pictures ready so that it can be seen online to other MLS participants. So again, that's why you need some extra time to have that on there. So then when it goes active, you're going to start seeing a lot of the showing time appointments, made. So you'll see a number of people start coming in to see it, and hopefully you will have an offer that weekend. So you're going to have a date here. That's the date if you're going to go coming soon or active. If you're not going to go active, then you're going to have to go in coming soon. Now let me show you the forms that you're going to need to use. These are local forms from our MLS. Where did it go? Oh, why it's taking so long to get down there? Ah, there it is. This is your coming soon no-show. And you will notice right here, first look at that, may not be shown in red. And if it is shown, the listing agent gets charged $1,000. And yes, I had an agent got charged $1,000. Thank goodness we haven't had anything more than that. In fact, I actually had 2, but it wasn't the same person who showed it the second time, because otherwise it'd be $3,000. So you want to go over that form with your seller, that you're not going to open it up to the public. Nobody's going to be seeing their house during that period of time. And right here, this date should match the date that we just looked at in that little paragraph that says the date it goes active. That's your active marketing date. Then it should match this one right here. And this is the date you put in MLS as referred to as marketing date. All right, the active. Now you're going to get seller signatures, or excuse me, initials, that they understand that it may not be shown. You want to make sure that they understand each of these paragraphs. Now come down here and you're going to put the property address, the seller's signatures, There's 2 sellers, your signature, and I have to sign this. This form and the firm exclusive, you have to send it to me. Now in DocuSign, when you send these forms out to be signed, there is an order of signature. So set the order of signature first to go to the sellers, then to go to you, and finally come to me. It is important that the coming soon come to me, but it's critical that the firm exclusive comes to me. And it looks just like this. This is your Canopy firm exclusive. The firm exclusive, that means it's not going to go in MLS. You can't put a sign in the yard. It can only be sold by people in our office. And I have to register it within 2 business days of the marketing date, excuse me, of the seller signing it. So right here, this is obviously just the information that I have to, some of the information I have to register. Again, you're going to get the seller's initials. The seller signs it, your name, your signature, and right here, I'm what's called the member participant. I'm the broker in charge of the firm, and the term they use at MLS for the member participant, the BIC is the member participant. That's the thing that I've got to have to send it in to MLS. So if you get a firm exclusive that you're only going to sell within in the office, make sure that I have it within 2 days. I don't want to get fined. Okay. And I don't want you to get fined. So now let's go back up here to the listing agreement. Those are the 2 forms that you need to be concerned about when you're doing paragraph 10 of the contract. I gave you a copy of, or I'm going to send it to you, the copy of the listing agreement for the residential property. And also there's a separate one for vacant land. So you can be able to see, there's not an awful lot of difference, but just so you can, that you can see them. Okay. So I put that in there. And again, put your name and your email in the chat box for me. And that way I'll know who to send it to. Now back to paragraph 10 we were just talking about. Well, where did it go? Not there yet. Okay. There it is. So if you put that date as the date on that coming soon form, then we're good. We're consistent. Then you can put signs out. You can put open house signs out. You can have open houses. You can advertise. And that's what all these things are here. And make sure that if for whatever reason, this is something that some of the agents do, if the seller needs longer than 4, 5, 6, 7 days, they might go initially as a firm exclusive, where you can't, you're not going to really put it out there publicly to sell. Then when they are ready to sell, you can terminate the office exclusive or firm exclusive. You can terminate it. And then at that time, go with your coming soon and your regular pattern, how you were going to sell it. Every now and then a seller will want to go ahead and do a listing agreement, and it may be 2 months before they're really ready to sell. Maybe they're thinking about, they're getting a new construction home, and they need the period of time. So just be aware of it. And it says, if we need to do that, we would use the form 710. It kind of says so right here. Most of the rest of these paragraphs are pretty self-explanatory. You do need to obviously watch all these little boxes. Make sure you get answers to all these little boxes. The sample forms, a while ago, I think it was Maya asked about the sample. Make sure if you give them a form, it has the watermark sample written on it. And if it doesn't have a watermark, you just write with your big old pen, write sample, so that no one can use the forms if they're not a realtor. There was one new section that I want to point out to you, the fuel tank. Fuel tanks have become a big issue recently. Most people who have fuel tanks have propane tanks just for gas logs. There are people who heat their houses with fuel. Now, if there is a fuel tank there, it's likely not owned, so the seller owns the fuel in it. The seller cannot sell that fuel. The seller can use all the fuel they need, but they have to make fuel available for the final walkthrough. The final walkthrough, the buyer has the right to make sure that those gas logs are working. So the commission has, just this last version has come out and said that if there's fuel in the tank when the buyer owns it, that fuel belongs to the buyer, and the seller may not sell the fuel back to the fuel provider. That's something different this year. So make sure when you're talking to your seller, they can use it, but they got to make sure there's enough in there for the final walkthrough, but they cannot sell the fuel back to the fuel provider. Okay. And if it's a lease property, obviously they need to make that known, or if they own it. Most people in our area do not own them. It goes through the explanation of seller's duties. The other thing I wanted to point out to you is right here on dual agency. We talked a little bit about it as we were talking about the disclosure, and the working with real estate. This is a very full explanation of dual agency. They're not going to read it probably, and you're going to go into a little bit more detail maybe than I did earlier as to how dual agency works. Dual agency is the firm. It's not you as an individual. And what they have put in here now, again, this is kind of new formatting. If the seller does not want you as an individual to be a dual agent, then they're going to check it here. Seller does or does not allow you as an individual. But if they will allow the firm to be a dual agent, the firm then can designate, and this is where you really would like them to initial here and here. It's up to you. You may do dual agency. I'm not advising, and I would advise you probably not to do it, particularly until you're a little bit more confident in your business. It may be best that the seller says you don't do it. All right. But definitely try to get them to go with the designated. Now, if they just say, no, I don't want a Valentine agent selling it. I don't care if 500 agents don't want to see my property. I just want you to be responsible for it. This is an option. It's certainly not the best option for them, and it's not the best option for you, but it is an option, and you do have to offer it to them. Okay. And that, again, that ties back to your disclosure early on. This is if they terminate or if they breach, these are the remedies. And you do have to point that out to them, because every now and then we do have people who breach. And so they need to be aware of it. And you want to definitely put the wire fraud warning, help them to understand the seriousness of it. It still is going on. And so anytime they want to give wiring instructions, or if they when they close on their property, they're going to give instructions, those need to be given verbally to someone they trust in the organization that they give it to. Often it's going to be the paralegal they've worked with. So, and then you're going to get, obviously this is going to be signed by the sellers. If it's an entity like the trust I told you about a while ago, or the LLC, then you're going to put the name of the entity here. And there's a signature by the authorized person for this entity. Then you're going to print their name here and give contact information. Down here, it's Keller Williams Valentine. Our firm license number, and if you want to write this down, is capital C 13291. Capital C 13291. Down here is your signature and your individual license number. And this is your phone number and your email here. There are a few other forms, and I have talked way over our 3 o'clock. I thank you for letting me get to know you a little bit at the beginning of the session. But if you have questions, My email is my full name at kw.com, or you can send it to kwvalentinebic@gmail.com. Or my cell number is 704-904-6625. 704-904-6625. And I'll try to answer any questions you might have. And again, I'll send you out these forms. Next week, we'll be talking about the buyers on the buyer side. And if you have some questions from the listing side, we'll start our session maybe with some questions if you want to ask those. I hope this has been helpful to you. And I look forward to seeing y'all around the Market Center. Sure is good to meet you today. Thanks. Love you, sweet smiling
Thank
faces.
you.
Oh, you're certainly welcome. Y'all take care. God bless you.
Thank you so much. Have a good one.
Bye.
Oh,
Bye-bye.
Saber. Are you able to still send us that form? I know we sent you our emails.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I was trying to see the order of all the paperwork that we need.
Yeah. Let me see. Make sure. Where did it go? Let me stop share. I want to make sure. I'm getting ready to get your emails. So I'll send them right now.
Thank you.
Gotcha.
Have a good one.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate y'all. Take care.